Late autumn, 1944. Somewhere in liberated Europe, General George S. Patton's Third Army was carving through enemy lines like a blade. The Germans were retreating, but they weren't blind. They knew too much. Too often, American advances met prepared defenses. Too often, ambushes landed with surgical precision. Someone inside Patton's own headquarters was feeding the enemy. A mole. An American soldier selling out his brothers for cash. The night Patton found out who it was changed everything. Patton had a habit that made his staff quietly miserable. He didn't keep normal hours. Long after the rest of headquarters had gone dark, Patton would prowl the corridors, checking logistics reports, rereading battle plans, thinking. Officers learned to work fast and clean because Patton might appear at any hour, over your shoulder, asking why a supply column was 2 hours behind schedule. Some called it paranoia, others called it genius. Either way, it's the reason he caught the spy. It was well past midnight when Patton noticed it. A strip of light bleeding under the door of a secured document room. A classified area. No scheduled activity. No reason for anyone to be inside. He didn't call for guards. He didn't announce himself. He moved quietly to the door and looked through the narrow window. What he saw stopped him cold. A sergeant, a clerical staff member who'd been embedded in headquarters for months, was methodically photographing classified documents, operational plans, troop movements, supply chain routes, the complete picture of what Third Army intended to do next. He was working with the focused calm of someone who had done this before. He never heard the door open. The first thing he knew was Patton's voice, not shouting, just cutting, like a blade through silence. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Sergeant?" The man spun around. The camera slipped from his grip and clattered across the floor. He stood frozen, caught absolutely and completely, with no exit and no story that would hold water. Patton stepped inside, closed the door behind him. "I asked you a question." The stammering began immediately. Something about authorized copies, late-night filing, administrative work. The excuses dissolved under Patton's stare. Within minutes, the sergeant's denials collapsed entirely. 2 MPs were summoned. The man was taken to Patton's office under guard. The sergeant wasn't a planted foreign operative. He was an American, born in the heartland, enlisted after Pearl Harbor, promoted based on solid performance. He'd worked his way into a trusted administrative role over years of reliable service. Nobody had suspected him. Nobody had reason to. But months earlier, German intelligence had found him through a chain of intermediaries. They'd made him an offer, money, serious money, more than an NCO earned in a year, in exchange for information about Third Army's operations. He said yes. He told himself the intelligence wasn't that critical, that no one would really be hurt, that he was simply making the most of an opportunity. He was wrong, catastrophically, fatally wrong. Counterintelligence investigators later determined that information passed through this sergeant had directly contributed to successful German ambushes and suspiciously accurate artillery strikes on American positions. Soldiers had died, not because of tactical mistakes or bad luck, but because their enemy had advance notice. The night Patton caught him, the sergeant had been photographing plans for a major upcoming offensive. Had those images reached German handlers, American infantry would have walked directly into a prepared killing zone. Patton had caught him at the last possible moment, but the damage already done was not reversible. Men were already in the ground. When the full scope of the betrayal became clear, when Patton understood exactly how many of his men had died because of one man's greed, witnesses said something shifted in him. His face didn't flush red. It went pale, white and still, like a man holding something very cold. The evidence was already spread across his desk by the time the sergeant arrived. The camera, recovered photographs, documents found in the man's quarters during an immediate search. Everything laid out plainly. Patton dismissed everyone except 2 MPs and his chief of staff. What happened in the next several minutes has been pieced together from multiple accounts. Patton spoke quietly. That was what made it frightening. There was no outburst, no theatrics. Just a low, controlled voice laying out exactly what had occurred, when the sergeant still tried to offer excuses. That he'd needed the money, that he hadn't thought the information was valuable, that he never intended harm. Patton's voice shifted for the first time. "Do you understand how many of my men are in the ground because of you? Do you have any idea how many of those ambushes worked because the enemy knew our exact position?" No answer. Just a man standing there, shaking. Then Patton did something no one in the room expected. He set his general's stars on the desk, told the MPs to wait outside. According to the accounts that have survived, he then presented the sergeant with two options. The first, face a full court-martial, military prison for life, the permanent public label of traitor attached to his name and his family's name forever. The second, Patton placed his service pistol on the desk. He would call it a combat-related incident. The man's family would be spared the truth. The room went absolutely silent. Then, reportedly, Patton pulled the gun back before the man could reach it. "No, you don't deserve a clean exit. You're going to face exactly what you are." The MPs were called back in. The sergeant was taken into custody. Brutal? Without question. Unorthodox? Far beyond protocol. But no one in that room ever doubted that Patton meant every word. The arrest sent a visible tremor through 3rd Army headquarters. Security procedures were overhauled within days. Document access was tightened. After-hours protocols were rewritten entirely. But Patton didn't stop there. He gathered his officers and told them exactly what had happened. No sanitized version, no institutional softening. "I found one of our own photographing battle plans to sell to the Germans. American soldiers died because of it. I want every one of you to understand what that means." Then he made a promise that his officers believed without reservation. "If it happens again in this command, I will not wait for paperwork. I'll handle it myself." The story spread through 3rd Army fast. German intelligence learned of the capture quickly. Their reaction, documented in reports declassified decades later, was not just disappointment, it was alarm. This sergeant had been a reliable, high-value source. His information had been accurate, timely, and operationally significant. But what truly unsettled German intelligence wasn't the loss of the asset. It was how he'd been caught, Patton himself, on a personal midnight patrol, confronting the man directly. One internal report from the period allegedly warned operatives that 3rd Army had become a hostile operating environment, that General Patton had made internal security a personal matter. German intelligence began pulling back other operatives connected to 3rd Army. Communication channels were burned. It wasn't just one spy lost. Patton's response had effectively neutralized an entire intelligence network. He'd scared them off his entire command by dealing with one man himself. The court-martial was kept quiet. The military had no interest in publicizing how deeply a spy had penetrated a frontline headquarters. The sergeant was convicted on charges of espionage, treason, and providing material aid to the enemy. The sentence: life imprisonment. Patton attended the sentencing. When the judgment was read, he stood, looked directly at the man, and left the courtroom without a word. The sergeant died in military prison years later, largely forgotten. His family never recovered from the disgrace. Patton was not a complicated man in the ways that matter most. He believed in loyalty the way other men believe in religion, as something sacred, non-negotiable, and absolute. He would tolerate mistakes. He would fight for his men even when they fell short. But betrayal occupied a different category entirely. This is what made his troops follow him so completely. They understood, viscerally, that if they were loyal to Patton, he would protect them with everything he had, and that anyone who threatened that bond would face him personally. The night he caught that sergeant, he wasn't just removing a security threat. He was sending a message to every soldier in his command. "I'm watching. I'm protecting you. And anyone who tries to destroy what we've built here answers to me. Not to procedure. Not to paperwork. To me." Did he cross lines? Almost certainly. Senior commanders questioned his methods. Reports were filed. Patton's response, when asked about it: "I caught a traitor trying to get my men killed. I handled it. If that's a problem, I'll answer for it. The brass couldn't argue with what came next. Intelligence leaks from Third Army fell to near zero. Other commands quietly adopted his security methods. And for the rest of the war, Patton kept his word. Personally conducting irregular patrols, personally reviewing classified access, personally making sure it never happened again. It never did. German High Command considered Patton the most dangerous Allied commander in the field, not just because of his tactical speed or his ability to coordinate armor and infantry, because Patton was unpredictable in the way that only truly committed men are unpredictable. He didn't follow the script. He didn't stop at the edges of his authority. He fought like someone for whom losing was genuinely unacceptable, not as a career matter, but as a personal one. The spy story is a perfect illustration. A different general might have let military police handle it through channels. Patton caught the man himself, confronted him personally, and then made sure every soldier in his command knew what had happened and what it meant. That's not just security management. That's a statement about who he was and what he stood for. Sometimes the generals history remembers aren't the ones who followed every rule. They're the ones who understood, at a fundamental level, what they were actually fighting for, and refused to let anything or anyone get in the way of that. Patton was that kind of general. And one American sergeant who chose German gold over his own brothers found out exactly what that meant. If this story hit differently than you expected, drop a comment below. Do you think Patton's methods were justified, or did he cross a line that even wartime doesn't excuse? Subscribe for more stories like this one.